Hey Internet. Now, you know when you find something from your childhood, like an old show or snack food or anything like that, that you used to love, and you see it and instantly as an adult you just go into this huge nostalgia mode and you just remember how great it was and everything you loved about it. So you check it out, you watch the show, you buy the food, you play the game, whatever the case is, and suddenly you realize it's not really as good as you remember? Well, hopefully that's not the case today, because I just spent a lot of time and a lot of money finding something I loved from my childhood 15 years ago. Alright, so the game is, as you can see, Pyramid Patrol. I know this case probably doesn't look familiar to any of you. That's because I'm sure most of you are either too young or were too smart to actually remember Laserdiscs. This is a CD the size of a vinyl record. This has a game on it, and it's, well, interesting. The only good thing is, while this was on CD, the consoles at the time it was competing with were things like the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. So they were able to pull off much better graphics and create a much better game, in theory, than the other consoles of the time. Whether or not that's true, we'll find out in a second, because I'm about to play this bad boy. Alright, now before I start talking about the game, I should tell you a bit about the console itself. The console I'm playing is the Pioneer LaserActive, which came out in '93. That's the same year as the 3DO and the Jaguar, so not much competition there. Actually, the NES top loader was released that year too, I believe. Most of you who played the NES might not remember it. It was a top-loading console instead of the front-loading toaster style that we're all used to. The downside of that console being it didn't have composite output. It was the RCA cable only, the coax, so it had its downfalls. But anyway, for this console, it uses Laserdiscs instead of the standard CD or DVDs, which weren't even around then. So that was something new as compared to the cartridges that most other consoles were still using. I mean, even the Jaguar released that year also used cartridges. It's also... The system is unique in that it has a lot of little plug-ins that you put into the front, allowing you to play other games from other consoles. It had a Sega plug-in, which would allow you to play Genesis or Sega CD games. It had a PC plug-in, which would actually allow you to play any DOS-based games. I believe you could only use ones that played off the floppy disk, though, not ones that had to be stored on an internal hard drive due to this not having one. And lastly, it actually had an NEC plug-in. For those of you that don't know, NEC are the makers of the TurboGrafx, or PC Engine in Japan, and it allowed you to play those games. That plug-in, however, actually sells for twice as much as the console itself does, and the console itself is pretty damn expensive. So I wouldn't recommend going to find that unless you really, really want to play TurboGrafx games and don't want to buy the console for a tenth of the price. Anyway, onto the game itself. I used to play this probably 15-20 years ago. I had a babysitter at one point, and her husband had this console, and for some reason trusted me to play it, which at the time was nuts, because even then this system went for several hundred, if not $1,000. But I loved the game. It's a fly-on-rails shooter. Think Star Fox, but without steering. As you can see now, it's kind of fast-paced and a bit hectic. Also, the graphics, back then these graphics were astounding. Obviously by today's standards they're garbage, but at the time this was way better than anything any of the other consoles were capable of. You would never see something like this on, say, the Super Nintendo or the Genesis. So this game isn't nearly as challenging as I remember, but then again, I was a small child at the time. Wow, I had to be around 10, I think. Most people suck at everything when they're 10, to be perfectly honest. Speaking of which, I kind of suck at this now. Okay, so I take back what I said about it not being challenging. It is actually challenging. It's just luckily very forgiving and gives you a lot of life. So even if you get hit a shit ton of times, you'll still live. But this, what you're watching now, is basically the whole game. You fly around, you shoot things. If I remember correctly, there's a boss fight at the end of every level. Don't quote me on that. This is actually the first time I've played it since getting it. So, first time I've played it in 15 years. My memory may be a little hazy.
The pyramid's at 10 o'clock. We're going in.
There's also stuff like that, narration and cutscenes. As far as I understand from reading the thing, which is not next to me, and just from what I remember, basically there's this big evil pyramid that appeared, and you're in a little group that flies through and kills the bad things inside said pyramid. And I think that's as much story as it actually has. I'm going to stop trying to talk now because I'm doing very bad at both that and playing. So maybe if I focus on one or the other, I'll do better. Don't quote me on that either, but I'm going to try. I want to point out, this is some really early 80s, 90s soundtrack action going on.
The door's closing.
Just listen to that rad music.
Let's move. Break through.
Whoops.
All units, this is Delta Platoon Leader. We're now entering BL-29.
This is Twins Command, Roger. Remember, be careful.
See, again, as a kid, and for the time this came out, seeing a level this big rendered in 3D was astounding. I mean, I know the enemies are just sprites, and at this point, not only are they just sprites, but they're just staplers. But everything in the background there is astounding 3D graphics. And even as far as the texturing for the engravings on the wall, like this was well above and beyond what other things at the time were really capable of. So even though the console was very short-lived and underwhelming, mostly due to the ginormous price tag, it was a worthy investment. I only remember one person that actually had it, but they loved the thing. And the ability to play all your TurboGrafx and Genesis games on the console as well really made it a worthwhile investment at the time. You could buy one console instead of 3. 4, actually, if you count the Sega CD as a standalone console. Did any of these other buttons do anything? No. Oh, that did something. What did it do? Oh, shit. That's a clear the screen button. I like that button. I am gonna die. Well, that sucks for me. Okay, less talking, more shooting. Got it. Ha! Fuck you, stapler. I believe you have my stapler. Sorry, Office Space flashback there. Sadly for me, that movie brings nothing but pain because I work in that environment. Basically work in that movie. Oh, fuck. Man, I bet this was crazy with 3D glasses on. Everything popping out and shit. Red music again.
The door's closing. Let's move. Break through. All units, this is Delta Platoon Leader. We're now entering BL-29.
That sounds like Colin Mockery.
Command, Roger. Remember, be careful.
Some of you might be too young to remember that too, but he was the guy, funny guy, on Whose Line Is It Anyway? I don't know if any of you even remember that show. It was Drew Carey before he was skinny and the host of The Price is Right. He hosted a game show, it was a thing. I'm just gonna stop making myself feel old. Really, this is one of those games where you just have to memorize spawn patterns and then get your gun there ahead of time. Unfortunately, my long-term memory is not that good. So while I used to play this every day and could probably beat it without getting hit, I remember nothing at this point. So I cannot do that good, as you can all see. Charge shot didn't hit anything. It's bogus. Stop shooting at me! What did I ever do to you? Seriously, all I'm doing is invading this pyramid. I'm not attacking you personally. Considering your leader is sending you out in droves of, up to 4 at a time, clearly he's not too worried about your safety. So I don't know why you're defending the guy. Personally, if I were you, I'd say, fuck him, fly out of the pyramid, and just let me blow the shit to hell. I think I'm at the boss portion.
Commence evasive action.
Yep.
Lock on target and fire.
And this was also from back in the day where bosses had visible weak points that you had to find. Luckily for me, they're very easily visible as they're different colors. Ow. Wait, I died? How? I was blowing the shit out of the thing. Okay, well. Anyway, that's Pyramid Patrol. Clearly I suck at it, but it is actually kind of fun. I think this game is actually what got me so excited for the Nintendo 64 and Star Fox when it came out. At the time I had not played Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, so this was my only exposure to those kind of games, and I used to think this was the greatest thing going. So, for those of you that have a whole lot of expendable income and nothing better to do with it, I'd say grab this. This game is awesome. There's a bunch of other games for the console. If I could find them at reasonable prices, I'd play them too, but for now, this is the only one I have. But like I said, even if you don't play the LaserActive games, it also works as a Genesis and 32X, and Sega CD. So you can play wonderful games like Sewer Shark, bad ports of Dragon's Lair, and if I'm not mistaken, the incredibly wonderful Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. So, how could you pass up an experience like that?
Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur. Sir. Bulbasaur, Bulbasaur, Bulba.
Don't complain, dude. I used to live in his room. I've seen some shit.